Before we get into this video is sponsored by Pro Guides. If you are dedicated to improving as a player, I highly recommend you check them out. Link in the description. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mickey C, aka TheLoLHounds, and today we have a build guide on the two highest ranked Yasuo players on the EUW server. So I thought I would do both of them as they are pretty closely ranked together. In fact, the one is ranked 81 and the other is 82 in Challenger, and they also go with very similar builds that I want to talk about, and that is going to be the Blade of the Ruin King Yasuo build. So Blade of the Ruin King is basically being played on every 80 carry at the moment. If you haven't noticed, it's just insane. In fact, even Tristana is building Blade of the Ruin King, and now I notice these two Challenger Yasuo mains started playing it as well. They go by the names of Hades, Underworld, and Lexip. Both of them have played over 300 games this season on Yasuo. You may have been surprised that it's not Arkadata or Ruin King being the highest ranked, who were both the two. They were the two top players last season on the EUS server, but it appears that both of them don't really play that much anymore. Anyway, this video is just going to focus on their runes, masteries, item build, and skill order. So without further ado, let's do this. So first of all, both players prefer playing Yasuo in the top lane, and if you think about it, Blade of the Ruin King is a much better item in the top lane, as you more likely play against champions who stack health. Summoner spells, they take TP and flash, and if they do play in the mid lane, they would often take either ignite or exhaust depending on the matchup instead of TP. Moving on to runes and masteries. So runes, they take attack speed reds and attack speed quints. Yellows would be either health per level yellows against magic damage champions or flat armor against AD champions. And finally, magic resist blues. Masteries, they both went with 18-0-12, with their keystone being fervor of battle. The only difference in their masteries between the two would be the one preferred natural talent while the other preferred vampirism. Now onto the item build. So firstly, I will just mention they don't build Blade of the Ruin King every single game, but it is in most games. I would say like 80 to 90% of games. Generally in the games where they play in the top lane against tankier champions, or when they would like to get some early lifesteal in their build. Also, they never ever build Bloodthirster anymore, so if they want lifesteal in their build, they would always go with Blade of the Ruin King. Like I said before, Blade of the Ruin King did get a buff last patch, or the patch before, I'm not quite sure, where the attack damage went up and the cost was reduced. There was also a few other changes as well, such as the attack speed was reduced, lifesteal was increased, and on-hit damage was increased as well, and the active now does magic damage. So in general, Blade of the Ruin King is a much better option than Bloodthirster at the moment, especially early on in the game, as it is cheaper to buy. Anyway, starting items, you want to start Doran's Blade and a health pot. As for your first back, it will depend a lot on how much gold you have and who you are up against, but a solid first back would be a Vampiric Scepter, which builds into that cutlass. Against 80 champions such as Pantheon or Quinn or even Jace, you may want to rush a Ninja Tabbies if you can, but apart from that, you can just start building into a Zeal. Your core items would be Blade of the Ruin King and a Phantom Dancer. This would then be followed by an Infinity Edge. Usually in the games where they do not buy a Blade of the Ruin King, they would be up against magic damage champions that can burst Yasuo down, so instead they would buy a Hex Drinker and wouldn't really worry about getting the Blade of the Ruin King. Maybe as a late game option they would. So you would only really see this in the mid lane, but you could come up against AP Echo, Cassiopeia, or AP Kennen in the top lane, for example. An example of a final build would be Blade of the Ruin King, Phantom Dancer, Ninja Tabbies, Infinity Edge, Maw of Malmortius, and a Frozen Mallet. Other items that they would consider would be Mercurial Scimitar for the QSS, and Merc Treads against heavy CC, Sterix Gauge against AD champions that can burst Yasuo down, and a Guardian Angel. Skill order: against melee matchups you want to start Q, and against range matchups you want to start E. Max Q first, E second, and your wind wall third. Sometimes they would get 2 or 3 points in E before maxing Q against ranged champions, but I think at the moment the most optimal way is to max Q after the nerfs to Yasuo's E not so long ago. Of course, they would then level their ultimate whenever they can. As for their playstyles from the games I did spectate, against melee matchups level 1 they would try to trade and poke as often as possible with their Q. Yasuo's level 1 I would say wins most matchups against melee champions, in particular because of the cooldown of his Q, and then potentially they would look for a level 2 or 3 all in. During the laning phase it's all about those quick fast trades with Yasuo, getting in and out, preferably when the enemy's abilities are on cooldown. Yasuo is very matchup dependent on how you play the lane, as it's all about knowing when to use your wind wall, which abilities to wind wall, and when to dash in, etc. Mid to late game though, both of them often look to split push and then rotate or teleport to team fights when needed. Anyway, this is going to be the end of the video. That is the 2 highest ranked EU West Yasuo mains who both have been building Blade of the Ruin King, which is the reason I wanted to do this video. It seems BOTRK is a very viable option on Yasuo at the moment because of the recent buffs to it. I will however mention that the mid-season update is coming up very soon, so the items on a few champions could change a fair bit, so I may have to do an update video. We will have to wait and see. Anyway, this is going to be the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If so, drop that like button, and as always, have a nice day.